Hi, I'm Phil Abernathy and welcome to 2024. I finally decided to make a short video on BMI or Bureaucracy Mass Index. In 2016, while I was leading the Agile transformation at IBM, we decided to handle the transformation in groups of roughly 20,000 people. We needed a way to quickly see which groups were fattest and where was the greatest opportunity for optimization. There was no measure available. There was no way to compare one organizational group against the other. That's when I came up with the BMI measure, and it was greatly successful at IBM, and I've used it effectively at many transformations, both large and small, over the years since then. 2024 is a year of sharing and giving back for me, so let's dive in. BMI is a very basic measure of body mass. It doesn't measure muscle mass and body fat and visceral fat, etc. It's very rudimentary. So is BMI. It's a rudimentary measure of organizational design effectiveness. It very quickly helps you answer a few questions. Is our organization structure optimal? How does it compare to other groups within our company or outside our company? Is there any fat? And if so, where is it? Every executive has their own way of designing an org, and if left unchecked, it can become extremely lopsided and top-heavy. Here are some of the impacts. You have slower growth due to a lack of strategic clarity in the organizational maze, resulting in suboptimal products, services, slower time to market, and poor customer service and satisfaction. Every additional unnecessary person not only increases the cost, but also generates unproductive work for at least 4 productive people. A fatter org means higher cost, complex structures and processes, lower productivity, and slower decision-making. All this resulting in lower margins and profitability. You also increase risk, especially in cybersecurity, due to the lack of single-point accountability and increased dependencies and blockers. And finally, the biggest blow is disengaged people that are frustrated with the politics and bureaucracy that takes over a bloated organization. This makes it hard to attract and retain great talent. In summary, it's a huge cost to pay for not continually optimizing your org structure. To share some of my findings of the root causes in this area, I'm going to splice in a talk that I did at the Business Agility Conference in Sydney in 2018.
The maze and the madness. Traditional organizations started off functional groups, sets, and then it went on. You got HR, finance, Department 1, Department 2, Department 3. Around the 80s, we started going global. You had Sector 1, Sector 2, geographies, etc. And then around the 90s, something strange happened. We got this method of what is called KPI management. So now if something was not working, your strategy was not right, let's have a head of strategy. I've got a team that I worked with that had a problem with gross margin, so they appointed a VP of gross margin. VP of gross margin, VP of innovation, VP of this, VP of that, and it goes on and on. And in the center is Bob. Bob is still the single person doing the work. That has not changed. And we've built this inverted pyramid on top of the doers. That is really removing accountability and responsibility. You can't even say who's accountable. And these are good people. These are great people, great leaders. But very easy to say, oh no, the leaders maybe are not the right leaders. No, they're all good leaders. They've been set up to fail. And then we came across the madness. The madness is how work flows through the maze. So what you've got there is people coming in with the process. Let's make the process map. So they'll do process re-engineering. We've all been through that. You put it in maps, it sits there. That is not how things work. You've got another way that work happens in the organization. And if you really know how to shout and who to contact, you've got your network, there's a third little way that things happen. That's how work really gets done. And this is how things work. And then what do we do? Because it is the maze. Then we automate the whole lot. So now we go and buy SAP, or we buy whatever it is that suits our flavor, and now it's RPA, that's the latest buzzword, and we digitize the whole mess. Now imagine transforming that. It's all set in concrete. Very easy and structured when you're setting it up, and then it goes hard, and that's it, you're stuck. And of course, we then need an army of our project managers, maze runners, to run this maze. I worked with one bank in Australia. When we started the journey, they were at 104 developers in one area. Take a guess on the number of PMs, project managers. Well, you're almost right. It was 97. Maze runners. And I feel so sorry for them because they're fantastic. They've got all the accountability, no responsibility to change things, deliver on time. It's a thankless job that they can't achieve. So it's very, very difficult. And underlying all this, each one has their metrics, their dashboards, their KPIs, the governance. It's all there hanging around. And there's so much you don't know actually what's happening. And it's in this maze that sometimes we find ourselves struggling. You feel that you're the only one there pulling along. And it's the structure. And we come back to Conway's principle here, which said that your systems and your processes will only be as simple as your structure. You've got complex structures. You can forget about having simple processes or trying to simplify your processes. And that's what we need to address. We have to look at that dark dimension behind us, the maze and the madness. Without touching that, all agility efforts in pockets, they'll work fine. The minute you try to scale across the organization and really make change stick and sustainable, you start having a problem.
So what is Org BMI? In simple terms, it's the ratio between enablers and doers. And it's best represented as a percentage of the enablers to the total number of people, both doers and enablers. Now, every time I've used this, there's always been a little bit of resistance to the word enablers. And if the communication is not right, some people feel that enablers are less than doers. Enablers are not essential. And it couldn't be further from the truth. And the Google Oxygen study has proven that. Enablers are not less than doers. Enablers are absolutely essential. And it's the ratio that matters. Some organizations would prefer to use another word than enablers, for example, contributors, not a problem. So here are the 6 steps to calculating the Org BMI. The first one is identify the organization unit to be examined. Is this the IT group, or is this the marketing team, or is it the sales organization, etc. Then for the selected group, determine the product and services that they provide. It's essential to know this so that you then can identify who are enablers and who are doers for that particular product or service. The third step, which is sometimes the most difficult step, is to just get a list of all the people and their roles. Now, very often there could be people that are actually involved in delivering the products and services for the chosen group who sit outside that chosen group. Ensure that you get them on the list as well. You now identify the enabler and doer role groups. So here's an example. If you take a typical IT organization, the doers would be engineers, business analysts, testers, designers, DBAs, etc. Enabler roles would be managers, coaches, trainers, HR advisors, BizOps people, project managers, etc. Once you've identified the enabler and doer groups, step 5 is to assign the E or the D to each and every one of the people. You can do this very quickly by assigning their role to a role group, and then it automatically works out who's an E and who's a D. And finally, it's time to run the calculation. The calculation is very simple. It's the total number of enablers divided by the total number of people shown as a percentage. Here's an example. If you have 70 enablers and 180 doers, you've got a total of 250 people. It's 70 divided by 250 into 100, shown as a percentage. So your BMI in this case is 28%. So what does that mean? From experience and numerous bottom-up designs, we know that if your BMI is less than 10%, then you could be a bit too skinny. You do need a certain number of enablers to create an optimal flow for your doers. If it's between 10 and 15%, that's a good, fit, healthy BMI. 16 to 25, it's heavy, and over 25 is definitely unhealthy and overweight. It's amazing. I've seen a number of banks globally with a BMI of roughly 35 to 40%. So how long does it take to do an org BMI? Surprisingly, the longest time is to gather the data. It always amazes me how difficult it is to just get a list of all the people and their roles, both contract and employees. But once you have that in a simple Excel sheet, you don't even need their names. You can use employee IDs for confidentiality reasons. It should take not more than half a day to do the calculation. So it's a very simple way to quickly get a feel of your organizational design health. Systems thinking has shown us that organizations are like living organisms, and like all living organisms and human beings, we store up fat in good times in preparation for those lean times. And the same thing happens quite often in organizations where leaders fatten up the org when money is easily available because they know that budget cut is coming down the road. Here are 3 of the main pitfalls that I've seen in all the exercises that I've done. The first thing is omission. Certain groups of people are left out of the calculation, either because they sit in another part of the organization or, there's a tendency to just cover it up and provide a good BMI. The second one is rebranding. Sometimes when they know there's an org BMI effort underway, suddenly all the project managers become business analysts. And lastly, there's always an argument that some of the managers actually do the work and hence should be considered as doers and not enablers. Now, with every measure, there are ways to hack it and cheat it. So if you do want to corrupt the metric, you can. So where to next? Depending on the severity, the urgency, and the appetite for change, the next step is always a deeper organizational review and redesign. And this should always be done bottom up. At this stage, we'll go into much more detail. We look at team size, team composition, team purpose, geographical distribution, spans, layers, and single point accountability. But that's all for another video. Please let me know if you would like to see a video on the subject. Thank you for your time. I'm Phil Abernathy, and I specialize in digital transformations using business agility techniques. Operating model and org structure design are fundamental to that. If you'd like to know more about BMI or org designs, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn or at the email on the screen. Thank you and have a wonderful 2024.